Hello and welcome to today's episode of Music with Tony Toppi. Today's topic will be intervals. And just like we did with the major scales, we're going to learn about how to write them, sing or play them, and subsequently how to hear them. So first of all, what is an interval? An interval is just two notes and measuring the distance between those two notes. And we measure them in two ways with quality being words like major, minor, perfect, augmented, and diminished. And then we have numbers such as seconds, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. We have to, however, remember that there's no such thing as a first interval and an eighth interval. We have instead unison to represent one, and as I said before, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and then the last one is octave, which can be abbreviated to 8VE. So let's get stuck into writing them. And as promised, I'm going to use the bass clef. So there you go, all you bass clef instrument students out there. Here we go. Draw my bass clef. And I think today we will stick into the key of F major. Why not? So we have two notes, as I said. The bottom note is always going to be the first or the tonic note of the scale. So I'll just make a note of that. Always the tonic. So in our respect, now way, I'm going to call that do, because that's going to help us with the whole singing and hearing and playing them later on. So let's say, for example, I wanted to write a perfect fifth above F. I can do a couple of ways. I'm going to zoom in so we can really see this. So if that's the first note of the scale, we're going to call that 1, and we need to get up to 5. So 1, 2 on the line, 3 in the space, 4 on the line, 5 in the space. So that's where our fifth interval is going to go. Pretty simple. The biggest thing to remember is that the bottom note is always do, or the first note or tonic note of the scale. A secondary step to writing any interval is to understand the key signature. So, staying in F major, I'm going to now ask you, so that one was a perfect fifth. We're now going to write a perfect fourth, and I will backtrack a bit and talk about the terminology, but assuming you might probably already know that, I'm just going to fast forward here. So, perfect fourth, same way. 1, 2, 3, and 4 is going to be on the line. Now that actual note I've just written there is a B, and we should know that in the context of F major, B is B flat. So you must put the flat there in order for this to be correct. So I think that's fairly straightforward. Intervals are generally one of the easier questions on an exam. So they're usually first and usually worth 1 or 2 marks each, and it's just as well to get them right first go. Okay, very quickly I'm going to talk about the terminology. So we have, as I said before, unison, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and octave. I'm going to put a bit of a star next to a couple of them. So a star next to this one, fourth, fifth, and octave. So I'll just change colours to blue, why not? So anything that's a second, third, sixth, or seventh in the context of a major scale, or in unaltered intervals I call them, these are called major. So if you're going from do to another note within the major scale, these would be what we call major intervals. The others, however, are called perfect. So it might be an idea for you to either write that down or memorize it in some way. So you may mention, remember earlier I mentioned these other words, augmented, minor, and diminished. How do they work? Well, in order to do that, I'm going to show you a little chart. And here we are. If I look at the bottom, and I'll use my red colours, major intervals, as we've said down there. If we have an altered note from a major interval, it can either become minor, diminished, or augmented. So augmented meaning to raise, minor, lowered, diminished, lowered again. If we have a perfect interval and something's happened to one of the notes, particularly the top note, it can either be a diminished interval or an augmented interval. We're going to head back to the other page and I'm going to show you how we get that. So here we are. So once again, we will stick within our key of F major. And we are going to think about, what interval could we use? Let's start with a simple one, a minor third. And we must also make sure that we read the question, because sometimes it can ask for above and below, which we'll touch on in a moment. So a minor third above. My first step would be to just look at the third aspect. So finding our third note would be right there. Both of these notes, F and A, are actually part of the F major scale. So this would be a major third I've written here. So as we saw in my previous slide here, a major, my writing seems to have gone away. There's our major third. We want to make it into a minor third. So this little chart really helps, because in this context, the major third is actually just a natural symbol or nothing at all. So if I want to make that into a minor, I just go across one and add the flat. So let's head over there now. That A becomes an A flat. We have lowered that note by a semitone. Further to that, as we saw over here, if I now wanted to make that into a diminished third, it was here, we've gone to the flat, we go further along to the double flat. So back to our writing page here. And we make it into a double flat to get a diminished third. So that's how we get those. And it's the same principle for any other way. So we're going to go with the augmented fourth. This is an interesting one. I've picked this one in particular because if I wanted to write, that's our fourth interval, and we know that in F major it requires a B flat. But according to our chart over here, if we want to make an interval augmented, so the fourth, it's already a flat. To augment it means we need to raise it by a semitone. In this context, we need to natural it or naturalize it. So I'm going to delete that. In fact, I don't actually need to actually write the natural symbol. It's already implied, but just for the purposes of today, I will. So that's how we do our augmented intervals. A little trick as well, another little thing to think about, is fifths, octaves, unisons, fourths don't have a minor. So if I wanted to do, let's say, a diminished octave, that's already a natural. Let's go back to our chart. So we've got a perfect octave there at the moment. We want to make it diminished, which is just one level down, let's say. So that natural will become a flat because we have lowered that note by a semitone. So there we have it. That's our ascending or going up intervals. Let's have a quick look at the descending intervals. So let's say, for example, and we're going to just stay a bit easy at the moment. We've got this note, and the question is to write a major seventh below. Now, some people have been taught, and I've seen this in the past, that you just count down 7 from the note given to you. And that will work. Others tend to sometimes write a seventh going up and then dropping that higher note down the octave, which is actually incorrect. The way I teach my students, we see the words major seventh, we need to create a major seventh from this note, and the note we need to write has to go below. So at the end of the question, you have to look at the interval and say it is a major seventh. So if that's the note 7, let's put it that way, we go down 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we work out that 1 is down there. So F and E, both part of the same scale, it is a major seventh, we're done. Similarly, let's say we had to write an augmented fifth below. So there's the C sharp. Same thing, let's just work on the fifth aspect. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There we have it. And then you need to think to yourself, have you actually now got 2 notes that represent an augmented fifth? And in this situation, the answer is yes. So that's a bit of information on how to write intervals. Quite a bit there to think about, but really it's a bit of a formulaic process. And once you get more practice at it, singing and playing them, it'll become much clearer. So let's get into the actual singing or playing of them. So for this, I turn to this chart here that I've conveniently found on my files. As you can see, as usual, I like to use the solfa method. Each line here, as conveniently represented by the bar numbers on the left-hand side, tells you the types of intervals we're going to focus on for each little exercise. And I guarantee you, if you sing intervals every day, you will have taught yourself or practiced so many aspects of music, including melody. You can sing them in different rhythms. You'd have done chords and chord sounds in all variety of different ways. So I'm going to give you a bit of a snippet of what I do. If I was to go through every single aspect, we would be here for hours, and we don't want that. So if I'm looking at unisons, that's fairly simple. That's just the top line, and it's singing a major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Easy enough. Looking at the second row there, if you follow the slurs, they're the groups of notes that I'll be singing. So, for example, do, re, major second, re, mi, major second, mi, fa, minor second, fa, sol, major second, sol, la, major second, la, ti, major second, ti, do, minor second. So, how do I know which are minor, which are major? Well, I'll go back to the previous idea of knowing my key signatures. But we know that between mi and fa and ti and do are the semitones. Semitone is another name for minor second. So a quick little snippet of the others. So we have the thirds. Do, mi, major third, re, fa, minor third, etc. We have the fourths. Do, fa, perfect fourth, re, sol, perfect fourth. Now we have to somehow get the augmented fourth in there somewhere, and that's starting on fa. Fa, ti, augmented fourth, Another name for augmented fourth is the tritone. Fa, ti, tritone. My favourite interval. We look at the fifths. Do, sol, perfect fifth, re, la, perfect fifth. Easy. We look at the sixths. Do, la, major sixth, re, ti, major sixth, etc., etc. We look at the seventh. Do, ti, major seventh, re, do, minor seventh. Only two. And the last one, do, do, perfect octave. There you have it. So that's one way of singing all your intervals. I'm going to go back to the top. Another way you could do it is everything from do. Do, re, major second, do, mi, major third, do, fa, perfect fourth, do, sol, perfect fifth, etc. And then when you get to the top of the scale, descend, but from the top do. Do, ti, minor second, do, la, minor third, do, sol, perfect fourth, etc. So you get ascending intervals, descending intervals. That's probably a much quicker way to practice your intervals rather than going through each individual one. However, there is benefit to doing everything. Sing your intervals every day, all day. There is another way also, which is the chromatic intervals. So you could go do, ra, minor second, do, re, major second, do, ma, minor third, do, mi, major third, do, fa, perfect fourth, do, fi, tritone, do, sol, perfect fifth, do, lo, minor sixth, do, la, major sixth, do, to, minor seventh, do, ti, major seventh, do, perfect octave. Another way to practice. Whichever way works for you, do it. And do it every day. You will find intervals so much easier. Your melody will be much easier. Your chord recognition will be much easier as well. I completely have to tell you that's the best way to do it. Yes, there have been ways where students have learnt via songs, knowing that, for example, the major second is the beginning of Happy Birthday, or for example, a perfect fifth is the beginning of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, etc. That might work for you also. Personally, I've found more trouble remembering the actual songs than what the actual interval was. And there's a lot more songs you'll have to know, learn, and memorize. There's a bit of merit in that, but also I think for the purposes of being a good, reliable, solid musician, this solfa method is perhaps the best one to use. So I think that covers everything in intervals for today. I hope you've enjoyed the session. If you want any of these resources that you see on your screen, so there's this intervals in the major scales chart, or there's the intervals accidentals, or my notes, please send me an email with any comments, questions or suggestions to tonytoppi@me.com.